Hey y'all, Amber here. This week is one of my older characters in terms of length of time that I've owned him, named Andrew. His full name is Andrew Brendan Cole, strictly because I wanted to give him the initials ABC. I'm lame like that. Anyway. Oh, right, before I actually fully jump into this, I want to mention that I'm not sure if there's going to be a video next week. I'm running into tablet pen issues in the sense of like pressure and whatnot. I think my pen might be on its way out, and if I need to replace that, that's a $90 price tag. Might take me a little bit. So if there is a video next week, it might actually be a different format and whatnot because I'll record it on my S6 instead of my PC. I prefer drawing on my S6 anyway. And for the record, I'm talking about the Samsung Galaxy tablet. No, whatever it is. It's the Galaxy S6 Lite. Whatever way it's worded. So keep that in mind. I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. We'll see if I can put up with my pen or not. I honestly don't know because this was frustrating to finish, which is why the quality is weak. I'll reshade him later, but I don't think I'll record it. I plan on reshading a lot anyway, and a couple I want to redesign. Anyway, moving on. Andrew was a mediocre student, managing to pass his classes, but not acquiring anything too stellar from his grades, barring the odd test or project he did surprisingly well on. But that didn't really get in the way of graduation. He completed school with little issue, although there were, of course, plenty of bullies that would mock his name. He took it largely in stride, though, and just carried on. Although even now, years later, he will admit that he hates how he was called Alphabet, and does still hold minimal resentment towards his parents for choosing to name him something with initials like that. Life seemed to be going pretty well for him, though, and his family as well. Until about a month after his high school graduation, that is. He'd been running behind, held up at the coffee shop he worked at the time, and was late getting home. When he did finally manage to get there, he made his way in, apologizing to anyone who was around and expecting his parents to be home and unimpressed with him. They'd had plans to head out for dinner for his little brother's birthday, and he'd ended up holding them up. He knew that he had, and he felt guilty about it, but he was also sure that it wouldn't interfere with the reservation, or at least he hoped it wouldn't. As he made his way through the home, he noticed that it was oddly quiet, but he really didn't pay it any heed for the moment. For all he knew, they were just in the backyard enjoying the rather cool summer day. It wasn't blisteringly hot out there, and he knew that if he didn't need to get ready, that's exactly where he would be as well. So, it stood to reason that that's where the three of them were. He made his way up to the bathroom to get showered, changed, and then headed back downstairs, intending to head outside to let them know he was home and ready to go. And to apologize again, but this time to someone who would actually hear it. Upon finding that his family wasn't there, he made his way back inside to the phone and called his mom's cell phone. He got no answer, so he called his dad's. I'm sorry. Upon finding his family wasn't there, he made his way back inside to the phone and called his mom's cell phone. He got no answer. So, he called his dad's. With no answer there either, he called anyone he could think of for where they could be. Friends, families, etc. No one had seen them. No one knew where they were. So he did the one thing that he really didn't want to do, for it had a certain degree of finality to it. He called the cops to report them missing, and possibly in danger. It took nearly 3 months before he heard anything. In that time, Andrew had done the best he could to maintain his job and to keep going on with life. The one thing that was keeping him going was the fact that the results could possibly come back that they were all right. He knew it was a slim chance, but he had to keep that hope alive. Until he was told that the car was found abandoned in the bottom of a lake a couple towns over. No bodies were found, which was confusing the authorities, and Andrew. But it was at this point he realized, they're gone. There was no chance they weren't. Or if they weren't, he realized that they likely had a reason to not come home. He had been doing all he could to keep some semblance of hope alive, but it all came crashing down at this point. The funerals for the three of them, his mom, dad, and brother, were all done, and he was quite relieved that his parents had paid in advance for them all, his included. He let the house default and become the bank's property and moved out. He had to find somewhere else he could actually afford after all. One thing led to another, and he eventually found himself working at a lab in the city as someone that could be used for most human trials for drugs, treatments, and other such nonsense. Well, Okay, I don't think that is nonsense, but I think his situation and who he was working under is. But then again, it was Vanessa, who actually is a right bitch, and there is a video on her as well. I'll link to it in the card and the description below. Anyway, as I was saying, he found himself working at the lab and living in a decent apartment. It wasn't anything extremely comfortable, but it was quiet and solitary. Overall, it was pretty good for what he was needing. While there, he met Casey. Yes, I will link to her video in the description below and in the card. However, do note that her video does not have one of these voiceovers to it. Anyway, while there, he met Casey, a young woman who was down on her luck and often showed up with more bruises than he thought was right to be on someone so young that wasn't living a dangerous life. But he never got any answers regarding them. He asked, but she always dodged the questions. He did grow extremely close to her, though. Almost too close, some might say. And then it happened. She went missing. And the next week after she stopped showing up and answering his calls, he was in one of the rooms for a treatment, surrounded by glass, of course. Because what else would it be? When the lab exploded. Glass and other debris flew everywhere, scratching him up pretty severely and destroying his eyes in the process, due to the fact that there was a lot of glass focused around his eyes because it was I don't exactly have it specified for what the treatment or what the test was, but it was something visual. That's all I can say, because that's all I know. That's all I've come up with. In the end, he had needed to have some serious medical treatment to fix his face and to remove the orbs that were his eyes so they weren't just infected orbs in his sockets. And he ended up getting prosthetic eyes just so the sockets weren't empty, but he actually ended up stitching his eyes shut. It took him 2 years before he was willing to even acknowledge what had happened to him. Oh, and yeah, no, this stitching is barely visible now. It's been years. Anyway, it took him 2 years before he was willing to even acknowledge what had happened to him. It was about then that he'd started to work as a guide. He'd had to come to terms and learn about how to adapt to being blind alone, and he didn't want others to have to suffer as he did. So, he opted to put his experiences to use. He met Anna along the way as well. And again, I'll link to her in the description below. She had been intending to kill him that very night, but didn't for one reason, even if she didn't realize it at the time. His mana. It had curbed the violence that she felt within her enough that she opted to keep him around. He was happy for a fresh life, so he accepted it without any arguing, and they ended up staying together. Years later, he nearly died. Again. This time due to a virus that was killing off almost anyone that was unfortunate enough to contract it. Anna, who had grown to feel what her version of love was toward him, would not accept his death. As a result, she did the one thing that almost all those like her, Dradens, of basically a forest sprite of my own creation, know how to do, but are banned from doing due to the volatility of the process. She caused a genetic change on Andrew to save his life. In the end, he's the same as Anna, a Drayden and Lantha cross. Both are my own creation. None of it really shows in his appearance, barring the sharper than average teeth and the different eye color. But he's alive and doesn't care about the changes that did happen. Namely, he has a newfound appreciation for life and specifically flora, and did need to adapt his diet to include more Lanthan-style meals, which means meat, and I'm not going to go deeper into context with that one. Beyond that, all is good though, and he couldn't be happier, especially with it being that he learned he could actually control his calming mana a bit. And that's all I have written on his Toy House page, because I just opted to read this one instead. I'm too lazy, too frustrated to write an actual script. Anyway, point is, he does still pose as being blind due to the fact that when he ended up with the genetic change, it restored his eyes and restored his vision as a result. He keeps the shades because he maintains appearing blind due to the fact that, yes, he thinks it's a bitchy thing to do. And he doesn't like to, what's the word? Deceive people like this. But he also knows that if he were to come clean about being visual now, that his work as a guide would be over. And he really doesn't want to deal with that. He loves what he does. Anyway, if you have any questions about him, please feel free to ask. I am more than willing to answer them. There is going to be a link to his Toy House page in the description down below. Links to Vanessa, Casey, and Anna down there as well. And I think that's all I said I would link to. Anyway, with that, I am going to cut this, fight with my flippin' canvas, resign myself to realize I'm going to need to buy a new pen, which is not a cheap venture, and go scream into the void for the next 3 hours. I love you all. Catch you on the flip side. This is Amber out. See ya.